And so to know that chaplains can come and talk to spouses,
Yeah.
and to do counseling for couples and to help them to understand what their spouse who is a first responder is going through, why they don't really necessarily want to talk about things when they come home. We talk to responders on how to disengage from work and re-engage when they go back home.
Wow.
Right? So that they can thrive, so they can have healthy marriages. They can be engaged in their relationship with their kids.
Paul Bricknell, welcome back. We did a interview earlier when focusing on you pastoring the church that you pastor,
Right,
Rivertown.
Yeah, that was a blast. Thanks for having me there.
Yeah, and today we're going to talk about your other job, your other duty, which is executive director of the Cowlitz Chaplaincy, and so I'm really excited about that because I think that a lot of people know that we have a chaplaincy. They don't really quite have an idea of how it works or who does it or who asked for it or where it came from. So hopefully we'll answer a few of those questions today and just bring some clarity to that whole thing. And you're the perfect person to do it because that's your gig. Yep. You're the representative voice of the chaplaincy. Not necessarily the one who does all the chaplaincy work, but the voice of the chaplaincy. So tell us a little bit about where it came from, where it originated, how it originated, and how you got where you're at today.
So let's start with like how it works. Okay. So it starts with a phone call. The first phone call happens when somebody's needs assistance. They need a first responder to show up on scene. So let's say it's a cardiac arrest that takes place at a house. The phone call comes in to 911, and then they dispatch whoever is needed.
Yeah.
Now, while those responders are en route, they know what they're going to get into, and so they have the decision at that time to call a chaplain. And so they'll get on the radio, and they're going to call dispatch back, and they're going to say, "Please dispatch a chaplain."
Yeah.
So that's one of the ways we end up being invited to a scene. The second way is when they do show up on scene, and as they're taking care of things, they will ask the family, "Would you like to talk with a chaplain?" That's the other way we get invited. So the family can say yes, and that's when they'll get on the radio, call dispatch, and 911 will call our chaplains. So we've been doing this for 40 years.
So before we get into that, how would you compare and contrast that with how before the chaplaincy existed? What would happen in that scenario?
Well, I guess if the chaplain wasn't available, it would be the paramedic, it would be the firefighter, it would be the police officer who's trying to multitask.
Yeah.
Take care of whatever the emergency is while
actually doing
providing emotional first aid for the family that's watching.
Yeah.
And that is incredibly emotionally charged scene. So
and exhausting.
And taxing and try to wearing 2 different hats or 3 different hats in one time is a real skill that some of our responders have, but not all of them do. But it's also a skill that if you can offload that onto somebody else so that they can take care of it, then you're more laser focused to take care of the emergency that's in front of you.
Yeah, I was a volunteer early on in the chaplaincy, and one of the things that I ran into is there was this kind of feeling like, I'm not sure exactly why we need chaplains, but we're glad you're here, thanks for the help. But then after an event, they would go, "Oh, I'm so glad that you guys are here. I'm so glad you're doing what you're doing."
Yeah.
So it's one of those things I think you kind of don't know you need it until you realize that how much of a blessing it is, how much of an encouragement it is. And that's been going on for a long time.
Yeah, so 40 years. So in 1983, Sheriff Les Nelson, Pastor Dave Miner, Lyle Prather, they all started getting their heads together. And as a response to Mount St. Helens erupting and all of just the trauma that took place after that and the fatigue and the compassion fatigue that took place for the deputies of the sheriff's office.
Yeah.
And so the chaplaincy began as a response to that, and then has since grown from just working with deputies to all the emergency departments in Cowlitz County, from Toutle all the way down to Woodland.
Yeah. And it all 3 of those guys, Les Nelson and Dave Miner, and Lyle Prayer, they all went to church together.
Yeah.
So it's like they would talk as congregants and say, let's do something about this.
Right.
And I think Dave was really one of the ones, the driving force behind it, and said, we can offer the city something really significant if you guys would get together and work on this.
Yeah. I can't imagine a community now without a chaplaincy.
Yeah.
And what we have is incredibly special because most often in communities our size or even smaller, there are just a couple people who chaplain, but who also have full-time jobs.
Yeah.
And so your availability goes from 24/7, which is what we provide now, to I'll get there when I'm done with whatever I'm doing.
Yeah.
And that's,
or maybe not even get there.
yeah, or not even get there because you just flat out can't be there.
Yeah.
And that's the reality for most communities across the country.
So how does the Cowlitz chaplaincy compare to other chaplaincies in the Northwest?
In the Northwest, so down the road in Clark County, they have a slightly different focus and mission than we do. So our mission is to provide caring and support for first responders, their family, and then the community. So what it feels like when we show up on scene is we're going to check in with the command officer, or the paramedic in who's taking charge. And then we're going to support them by supporting the family that's going through it. But when all things are cleared, our focus is we double back and we check in with those people who are providing the support.
Yeah.
So the difference down the road in Clark County is that when the scene is all cleared, the chaplain's going to take care of and focus on the family. So the long-term care is going to be for the families for the next couple of weeks. But our long-term care is the first responders who have their careers and their whole life is wrapped around this.
That is so cool.
Yeah, so that's kind of the unique thing to our chaplaincy, and really it's a model that people are seeing like this is a model that we want to duplicate.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's attractive to people.
Yeah.
Although it's a little overwhelming, I imagine, from the side of the people who provide it, because you're not only providing a service to the families, but you're building relationships with the first responders, and that's an ongoing thing.
Right. Yeah.
It's not a one-time shot. I mean, I know that there are times when officers are going through difficult situations in their lives, relational problems in their marriage and stuff like that, and the chaplains are there for them. Like, that's a huge thing.
Yeah, to know that
as far as support.
Yeah, to know that you know who your targeted audience is. So anybody who's wearing blue, anybody who's wearing red, right?
Yeah.
So like police officers, firefighters, but it's not just limited to them. It's also the dispatcher, it's the coroner, it's the paramedic, it's the search and rescue, it's any responder and their family, right? So it's not just an asset just to the people who have careers or who volunteer to do that. It's like their family as well. And so to know that chaplains can come and talk to spouses, and to do counseling for couples, and to help them to understand what their spouse who is a first responder is going through, why they don't really necessarily want to talk about things when they come home. We talk to responders on how to disengage from work and re-engage when they go back home.
Wow.
Right? So that they can thrive, so they can have healthy marriages. They can be engaged in their relationship with their kids. And not just be a shell when they come back home and they can't tap into, why can't I talk to my dad? Why can't I talk to my mom? It's because they've gone to their nothing box and they don't want to relive what happened or talk about it. But we talk to families and marriages in regards to how to do that.
Yeah, and you and I know as pastors, both of us are pastors, it is like providing pastoral care for a whole family that includes first responders that come from all over the place,
right,
and may have different focuses and are at different places in their lives, but that's not much unlike a congregation, because you don't pick who walks through the door. I mean, if you're part of the fire department or the police department, we're here for you.
Yeah, we serve you, and we serve your family regardless of your faith.
So what's life like as a chaplain?
Oh yeah, like a chaplain. Well, I kind of joke with our chaplains that they're on call 24/7.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have, and I talked to them about this the other week, but we have this ministry of presence. And so that ministry is everything. But we also have this ministry of interruption. So like just as Jesus would be on his way to something to respond or take care of a need that he knew of,
Yeah.
how many times was he interrupted on the way? And that's kind of what it feels like to be a chaplain. So our chaplains, they're on call. They may not necessarily, they might be going about their business, about their day. However, at any point, whether it be in the morning, evening, or early morning, they'll get a phone call. And so they get interrupted all the time.
Yeah.
But it's always a privilege and a painful privilege to be invited into whatever is happening in our community.
Yeah.
It's not easy, but it's a privilege.
Yeah. So how do you help them process trauma, stress, all the fatigue that surrounds the care that they're providing in the city?
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, let's talk about the families that are going through it. We do a lot of reflection listening. Okay. So we will mirror what's happening. If they are incredibly emotional, we'll be right there with them.
Yeah.
If they're sitting, we sit. If they stand, we stand. But at the same time, if they're not in a place where they're not going to want to talk real deeply about it, we don't go there.
Yeah.
We don't try to barge our way into a person's emotional state, but we try to work with them where they're at. And that's really important.
Yeah.
But then there's the responder side of things, right? So responders tend to be, not always, but they tend to be guarded because they need to be able to trust you.
Yeah.
And so we work around that. And a lot of that is just kind of shooting the breeze with people, building trust, establishing rapport, that you are a trustworthy person and you know what you're talking about. And so as you continue to prove that you are a reliable, safe, competent individual who knows what they're talking about, who can navigate a death scene, who can navigate a search and rescue scene, who can navigate a drowning, like that's when you feel like that's when responders can be like, okay, they're trustworthy.
Yeah.
They're not a flake. They know what they're talking about. And I like them.
Yeah. What do you hear from some of the chaplains when they've just been part of a pretty devastating scene where maybe there's a loss of life or something? They come back into the office and they just sit there in a chair and, are they there for each other? Is there some kind of a process they can go through to debrief?
Yeah. So it's draining.
Yeah.
So just like a police officer sees it and they don't necessarily want to talk about it right away, it's emotionally fatiguing. So a lot of times what we do is when I'm available and when they do come back in the office, because not everybody comes back to the office right away.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Right? Because for whatever reason, we don't necessarily work from the office. We work from home. Yeah. So you might go back home, but if they do come back to the office and I happen to be there, then it's kind of like you can see them come back in and you can see how tired they can be. And so what I tend to do first is just say, well, tell me about your call. And I allow them to navigate the conversation.
Yeah.
And so from there, then it's just kind of reflecting what's being said back to them and clarifying how they're doing, and then checking in with them later. Right? So I try to pastor my chaplains or chaplain my chaplains.
Yeah.
And ask them how they're doing with their sleep habits, their eating habits. Are they easily angered, irritable? Like what are the same things that they would ask responders? I try to ask them.
Yeah.
So that they can make sure that they're doing okay.
Yeah.
And if they need to go see a therapist themselves.
Yeah.
all of our chaplains, they have accountability in their churches. They have a direct report in their church that they can confide in and talk to. It's one of the things that we require and want them to do. But at the same time, like sometimes you just need to talk to a therapist. And so we have some therapists in mind for our own chaplains.
For sure.
And then when we get together in our staff meetings, we'll talk through calls that are, we'll talk through some of the stuff that we've gone through personally and scenes. Sometimes just talking about the scene and what happened is enough.
Yeah.
So you don't feel like you're stuck with this event in your head.
Yeah. There's a kind of a crummy feeling to feel like you're carrying something along.
Right. And it's also important to note, like when people confide in us, we don't talk about that with the other chaplains.
Right.
We don't talk about the things that are confidence. So that's important. We're not all brainstorming and rehashing people's life stories, but we will talk about things that are important for us to know about the scenes, about what happened, who was involved, so we know how to continue the care for those people who went through it. Mm-hmm. And then if they choose to share that information with us, then they can. But we don't go in knowing all the juicy gossip of what's happening in someone's life.
No,
it's not how our chaplaincy works.
No, well, that's not how we're supposed to work either.
Right.
Those things are really in confidence. So, who would want to be a chaplain? I mean, like, what kind of person is attracted to chaplaincy? Is there kind of a makeup that you seem to see a consistency with?
Well, all our chaplains are great at telling stories.
Yeah, that's good.
I mean, they are. It's the individual who can just slide up to someone next to them and begin a conversation and break the ice, and it just feels very comfortable. If an individual has that skill set, that's a big win.
Yeah.
Right? Where you can put people at ease. They have to be comfortable in their own skin and know what they're good at and know what they're not good at. But an individual who also has this great ability to empathize with people and just like, I hear you.
Yeah.
And shoulder those things. But at the same time, they need to be able to not carry that with them their whole life.
Right.
Because if you can't separate some of the stuff that you see, then the scenes and the emotions that you carry will eat you up.
Yeah, you can't do your job.
And it will haunt you.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting because some of the things that they see and hear and feel are very different than most people would ever come into contact with, except maybe a police officer, a fire worker. Mm-hmm. So it must feel like it's a kind of a club of people who all experience the same kinds of
family.
Things. Yeah.
Yeah, it becomes family.
Very close.
There's a reason why firefighters are so close, and even police officers are so close. Firefighters especially, because they'll do a 24-hour shift together. They live together. They cook meals together. They sit down together. Yeah. And they stay in the same building together, right? And so, like, you become really, really tight. You become a family, and in fact, that's what it feels like. Mm. And so, sometimes your firefighter family is you're more close to your firefighter family than your own family.
Yeah, because
of all the different scenarios and scenes that you've responded through. It's like military. You feel really close. Your bond, it's really close.
Well, you care a lot about the chaplaincy as the executive director, and that's a different view than most of the chaplains have, I imagine. From your vantage point, what would success look like? How do you know whether the chaplaincy is successful?
Great question. Well, I know ours. It's real similar, like when you preach a message. After you preach the message, how do you know if it was a good win? How do you know if it's like, one of the reasons I know it landed well is when people talk to you about what God said through your message.
Yeah.
Or you hear somebody else He says, Pastor, I just had the best conversation with somebody about what was happening in their heart when God spoke to them through your message.
Yeah, yeah.
Or through a small group. So, how do we know when we've got a win? It's when our chaplains or when a responder comes up and gives a testimony about how important it was, to have a chaplain on scene.
Yeah.
The role that they play in their life. Or to run into somebody in the grocery store and they say, yeah, I had a chaplain respond at my house when this happened with my family. That's just incredible.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. The other things is when we do public education. So like when I talk at a Rotary or Kiwanis or some club, and people are like, that is so great.
Yeah.
I cannot believe we have that. That's so cool. I didn't know we had that. And you can hear their excitement. And then the next thing is there any way I can be involved?
Mm-hmm.
How do I become a chaplain, or how do I volunteer for the chaplains? That's when things are clicking for people.
Or even when they say, I don't know how often this happens, what they say, I really want to support and invest in this.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do except that I know I can support you financially. So can I do that? And I think sometimes we think that there's nobody out there that really wants to do things like that. But there are really people who are waiting for opportunities to help in a financial way. And that's always an option too, I think.
Yeah. Last year I spoke at the Kelso Lions group. Yeah. And I always give an opportunity for people to financially support us. A couple days later, one of the guys came in. He says, I want to be responsible for dispatching, doing 2 calls. I want to dispatch a chaplain twice.
Wow.
So each call, we just say it's $15 to dispatch a chaplain to be on scene in 15 minutes. So what's it worth to have a chaplain get out the door and be there in 15 minutes? It's worth $15. Now what they do on scene is worth way more, but just to be there. So he says, put me down for 2. I want to know that I have dispatched a chaplain twice this month.
That's so cool.
So that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. So is that kind of information available on your website? Can you find out the impact of your giving on the website? Is that there?
I don't know if we've quantified it on the website itself.
Because that's really interesting.
I do talk about it, but I don't know if we put it out there.
Yeah.
So.
Well, for anybody who wants to, that's available.
Yeah.
You have the number now. It's $15 a dispatch. Yeah, I just think it's incredible that we have such a valuable asset in our community, and really not a lot of people really know how it works. Mm-hmm. And so I'm really grateful that, first of all, that you're leading it, that you're providing oversight for it, because Paul, they need somebody who's not a chaplain to run things.
Yeah, I'm not a chaplain.
Yeah. Wow.
And I'm not the boots on the ground who are responding day in, day out. I'm not on call. I get to stay back, chaplain my chaplains, chart the course, raise funds, tell our story, interact with our community. It's a good skill set for where I'm at. So I have my circle of influence for the chaplaincy is 1 with the church, 2 with the business community, and 3 with the responders.
Yeah.
It's really beautiful. It's special.
And nobody appreciates that as much as the chaplains who were chaplains before they had an executive director.
Oh, man. Jeff,
it would
can
be
you imagine,
so hard.
Listen, can you imagine wrapping up a scene and coming back to the office knowing that you have to raise money?
Oh.
And you've got to go meet with a donor?
Yeah.
In the back of your head, you're still processing what you just got done doing.
That'd be crazy.
It's difficult.
Yeah.
And so that's when, 5 years ago, the chaplaincy just said, look, I think this is a great opportunity for us to separate those roles out and introduce a part-time exclusive director who can take care of the business side of our ministry.
Yeah. And you have a fundraiser coming up soon.
Yeah.
Which is people's opportunity to, I've been at a fair number of fundraisers now, and it's really feels like the bigger family that's gathered together, the people who care about what you're doing. And it really is, man, it's an uplifting time for the people who are involved in it.
Yeah, our dinner May 18th is it's a vision casting event. It's a way to gather people to hear who we are, what we do, and what we're doing, And so it's a fantastic event. This year it's called a Night of Pure Imagination. Right? So we're doing a Willy Wonka theme.
I saw the chocolate bar.
Purple, orange hat. I'm doing it.
That's awesome.
No, it'll be a really special event. So churches and organizations, individuals, they sponsor a table. They can do it through our website. They bring their closest friends, people who are like, this, we need to get more people involved, because if anything we've learned over the past 5 years is that nonprofits that live by a fundraising event will die by a fundraising event. You can't rely upon events to be the backbone of your ministry. Right. You've got to rely upon individuals who say, you know what, I'm there every month. I will make my donation because I want to make an impact in our responder community. I want to make an impact on families, my neighbors who are going to go through it. Yeah. And I want them to have a chaplain available.
You're good at this.
Yeah,
you're really good at this. No, thank you for what you're doing. I really appreciate it. On behalf of the faith community especially, thank you for breathing the Holy Spirit into a citywide ministry, a county-wide ministry. It's really a huge blessing. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Yeah. It's a privilege.